Good morning, animal science class. Just getting prepared. It's Thursday and getting set up for our Monday lab. Obviously, we've just started talking about nutrition. We started balancing rations and putting feeds together. I want to spend a little bit of time today going over the digestive tract, which on Monday, make sure that you come prepared because we're going to have digestive tracts. And we're going to lay them out, take some measurements, look at some of the internal lining, track digestive breakdown from the mouth all the way through to the rectum, and see how nutrients are absorbed and utilized throughout the system. So, make sure that you wear clothes that are appropriate because we probably will get dirty and it will smell just a little bit, so be prepared. The function of the gastrointestinal tract is to break down feedstuffs. We talked about using glucose to make ATPs and how it worked in glycolysis to create pyruvates and then acetyl-CoA, and how it worked through the Krebs cycle and then through the electron transport chain. We also talked about amino acids and how we needed amino acids for protein synthesis to build polypeptide chains to create enzymes and active proteins to make the cell work. Well, the function of the gastrointestinal tract is to break these feedstuffs down into those products so our animal can use them at the cellular level. If you look at this is a picture of an embryo. This embryo has just hatched. Obviously, you can see that the zona pellucida is gone from it and just the trophoblast cells. And you can see the intercellular mass. Well, on the intercellular mass, the different cell levels are going to turn into certain organs or parts of our newly created animal. And when we talk about the digestive tract, it is from the endoderm, which is one of the most internal layers in the intercellular mass. Digestion is accomplished by a lot of different things. First, it is the physical and mechanical action of chewing, which we call mastication. This is breaking feedstuffs down. Now, different animals do this differently. Obviously, our ruminant animals are missing their top front teeth, so they just have a dental plate, so they use their tongue more and their back molars to grind and mix the feed up. We also work with chemical actions from our enzymes, like protease and lipase and carbohydrates. We have hydrochloric acid that denatures and breaks down feeds in the stomach. All of these things work together to break the feeds down so that we can get them into simple sugars or amino acids so we can use them. We see this classification here in terms of monogastric and ruminants. We do know that our animals have two different types, and we know our horse is a special monogastric because, yes, you can see it on the slide, they have an enlarged cecum. The cecum is almost double the size of their stomach, and it is what is used to break down the high cellulose, high lignin type products like grass and hay that we feed our horse. In the ruminant animal, which we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Monday, has 4 different stomach compartments. And these stomach compartments are meant to break feedstuffs down. When we track the esophagus, they have to make a specific note of where the esophagus comes into the stomach, because it comes in right between the rumen and the reticulum. And depending on density and particle size, the feeds will either go to the rumen or to the reticulum. And we are going to look at that very closely as we pull that apart on our ruminant digestive tract on Monday. Our classifications of animals: we have our carnivores, who are meat eaters. We have our omnivores, which eat meat and plants, and our herbivores. We are going to focus mostly on herbivores. A few omnivores. I should have a pig digestive tract for us to go through, which, even though we feed our pigs as a herbivore where they're eating mostly corn and soybeans, they technically have a digestive tract of an omnivore. So we are going to look at the differences between the herbivores and the omnivores. Our steps to digestion: we're going to use their mouth and their tongues to pick up feed They're going to go through the mastication process where they're going to chew it up with their teeth. It's then swallowed down the esophagus to the stomach. If it's a ruminant, it typically goes to the rumen first. Then it's regurgitated, re-chewed until the particle size gets small enough that it drops into the reticulum, the omasum, and then the abomasum, which is the true stomach, where we get the digestive process of all of the enzymes and the hydrochloric acid. Once we go from the stomach, we go into the small intestine. And the small intestine has 3 parts, which I'll lay out here in a second. But the first part has to neutralize the pH. Obviously, coming out of a high acidic stomach, the pH is around 2, 2.5. We need it in the small intestine to be about 6.8. If it is too acidic, it will eat the lining of our small intestine, which is not what we want. We want it to be absorbed. So absorption happens then in the small intestine. Once we absorb it across the lining of the small intestine, it's picked up in the bloodstream, and then that glucose and those amino acids can be carried to different cells for the cellular metabolism. So prehension just works differently in each animal. Animals obtain food. So this is just the way they get food. If it's a chicken, they're going to use their beak. If it is a lion, they might use their claws and their super strong teeth. If it's a cow, they're going to use their tongue and their lips to pull that grass in and then rip it loose rather than bite it because of the front teeth issue. But all of the species are going to handle this process different. Mastication is chewing. We talked about this. We are going to crush that feed over that teeth as much as we can. Obviously, with different species, our teeth are different, and so if it is a carnivore, they're going to be ripping and tearing and chewing most of that up a little more thoroughly. If it's a cow or a herbivore, they're going to just bite that grass off, swallow it for the most part, and then regurgitate it later, re-chew it, and re-swallow it again. Salivation is very important. Our saliva not only lubricates, but it adds water, which allows that feed to add taste. So when we were talking about nutrition, we were talking about dry matter versus as fed. Well, most feedlot situations where they're feeding animals are going to add a certain moisture level that helps bring out the flavor and increases that animal's appetite and the amount of feed that it will consume. And we are assuming that the more feed it consumes, the faster it grows and the sooner it's ready for harvest. With salivation, lubrication, water allows taste. It also adds some enzymes. In dogs and cats, they are the highest in the lysome enzymes, which are bacteria killers. So you've probably all seen your dog eating on something that's dead or rotted or something that you can't hardly stand to be around in the smell, and your dog eats it and thinks it's great. That is because of that high bacteria killing enzyme that our dog has. They can eat that and it keeps them from getting sick. Swallowing, deglutition, passes food and water from the mouth to the stomach. This is down a great wonderful tube called the esophagus. This is a muscular tube, which we'll look at. And it has muscular waves, which causes the feed to be pushed down the esophagus down into the stomach. There's a little flap. We call it the sort gate, which we call the epiglottis. And the epiglottis is right at the back of the mouth where it starts into the esophagus. When we swallow, this epiglottis opens and it allows food and water down our esophagus. When we don't swallow, it leaves it open to go down the trachea, which is headed for the lungs. So we will look at this cartilage because it's a cartilage flap that's starting into the esophagus, and it is the epiglottis. The tongue will create a bolus. It pushes it to the back of the mouth, and then the animal swallows. When they swallow, the epiglottis opens. Into the esophagus we go, and down the esophagus to our stomach. Now, in the monogastric animal, like us, we have different parts to our simple stomach. And the first part is the cardiac region. The cardiac region has a valve at the top of it, and this cardiac valve typically closes as that food travels down into the esophagus, so we don't get food coming back up, because monogastrics are not meant to regurgitate. We don't regurgitate our food and rechew it. That is for the ruminant animal, and the ruminant animal would consist of the cow, the sheep, the goat, deer, elk, animals along those lines. When we talk about the stomach, there are differences also with our animals in terms of the chicken. The proventriculus is the chicken stomach. Now, the cow has 4 of them, but the true stomach is the abomasum. That is the stomach that's filled with hydrochloric acid, like a monogastric stomach. And this churning and movement of our true stomach with our acid causes that physical and chemical breakdown of those feeds, along with several enzymes like protease and lipase and carbohydrates, and they break down protein, fats, and lipids. So very important that we have these enzymes present, and these enzymes are released from several places. So we will talk about that as we get to those places. The small intestine, which we're going to lay out and measure. Are all small intestines the same length? You're right, they're not. Small intestines will vary from species to species. And when we look at our species, like the pig, who does most of their nutrient absorption in the small intestine, their small intestine is fairly long. Same with the cow and the sheep. When we look at critters that are using their hindgut for fermentation, like the horse, their small intestine is fairly short. If we look at the small intestine here, you can see that it's 3 sections. We know that the 3 sections are fairly important. The duodenum, which is the first section, is the section I was talking about that neutralizes the pH level. It's a very short section. It gets fluids from either the bile duct, and it also gets pancreatic secretion, but the bile duct is what actually neutralizes that pH coming from the stomach into the small intestine, because if we put that high acidity into the jejunum and the ileum, which are the next 2 sections, which are so opened up so that we can absorb those nutrients and get them into the animal's body, it would eat them in 2, because we have to have it, like I said, at a nice pH of 6.8. Well, hopefully this gives you a good introduction into it. We will see on Monday all of these parts, and we will lay them out, and we will look at the tissue layer and the feed that's in it. It should be fun and exciting. Make sure that you come prepared for being outside and a bit dirty.